vendors come in and the vendors do the dog and pony show and show you all the feature set, right? But it's not solving the problems of the agency. Nobody's done an evaluation of what they're trying to accomplish, right? So you don't even know what the goal is. And you're buying a system and you put it in and you find out this is not what we want. And you spend a lot of time and effort and money on it.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. It is a little bit rainy outside, but this is my favorite day of the week because I get to spend it with you and we get to talk to some amazing people.
We do. And today we're in for a treat today. We have got a great guy on. He is not only an amazing mentor to me, I can always rely on him to whatever question I have or whatever problem I'm going through. He will pick up the phone and call me as soon as he sees my email or text. We've got George Robertson on today. Welcome, George.
Hey, Lindsay, thank you so much. And thanks for the introduction. And Carey, it's good to see you and hear you as well. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And congratulations on starting your podcast and kicking it off with one of my friends, Sydney Lowe. And I listened to that the other day. Excellent. Loved it.
Yeah. Sid is amazing. I mean, honestly, she's been one of my best friends for I don't know how many years. We joked. I was actually once on a trip and I was actually in Asia. So it was a 12-hour difference. And my husband got up in the middle of the night and said, "Who in the world are you talking to?" And I was actually on the phone with Sydney Rowe, and, everybody else acclimated to the time zone difference and I didn't. So, she called, I answered, and it was pretty fun. So I actually did a couple of video calls with her while I was there too. It was pretty funny. So she's amazing. I'm really glad that we got to have her on.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've known Sid for quite a while, and she's really she puts everything she's got into what she does, and she's excelled, and now she's over at Vertifor doing a great job.
Well, speaking of that, why don't we talk about how you got into this crazy, awesome insurance industry that we all love? Tell me, why don't you give us, a quick version of how did you get in this industry and how where your career has taken you?
Sure, absolutely, Carey. I tell you, it's very interesting to me because I grew up in this industry as a lot of people have, I think, over the course of time. And you get out, you think, well, I'm never going to do this or whatever. But I took a different approach in it. But I started out probably middle school, junior high, whatever you want to call it these days, going into the agency in the afternoon after school and filing the paperwork. And, back in that day, the database, Carey, was in a folder in a cabinet drawer in several cabinets, and they were alphabetized, and you had to manually go pull the data out as opposed to you hit a button and you find the file, right? So a little different than where we are today. And Lindsay, we could talk about some really great stuff in regards to the technology back then, but today it's a lot better. But I started that way. My degree is in computer science, so I've worked for some tech firms over the years and had some great experience in the sales arena, as well as, Carey, believe it or not, I was a programmer when I started out. Yeah, so then I went into the sales arena. That's a whole different story we'll talk about some other time, but I've got that background. But
I love that.
The family business is interesting because, you're working for your father. Your grandfather's been in the business. He sold life insurance. Father's in the business. And then eventually one day my father had to have open heart surgery. And so he basically turned it over. He said to me, you can buy it or I'm going to sell it. And we had an agreement early on. And I told him, I said, if you ever want to get rid of this, let me know. And I went out and got my license, worked in the agency, was still doing the computer stuff and the tech stuff in my career path. Then one day this just happened and we made the move.
Hey guys, if you're looking to improve your bottom line, allow your team to operate efficiently, and really improve that customer retention, I believe you should check out Ascend. Ascend is the all-in-one insurance payment solution. They are focused on streamlining your invoicing, premium financing, accounting, and they'll even make your carrier payables for you. They are taking agency bill and making it as easy as direct bill. That is a game changer. They integrate with all of the major AMS players, and here's the best part. It's free. There is no subscription, no cost to you. They allow your customers to pay how they want. If you are interested in improving your efficiency, go visit ascend.com/insurance refocused and let them know that we sent you. You know, I will tell you, it's interesting that you share that because I get to work with a lot of agencies. And if you looked at the headlines today, you would think that most agencies are selling externally for huge multiples. That's what's in the headlines, right? But about 75% of the agents that I deal with want to perpetuate internally. They want to give the next generation an opportunity, and they're family-run businesses. So I love hearing the stories. Those never hit the headlines. That's the problem. In fact, it's one of the reasons we're even doing this podcast, is because we want the stories of how those transitions happen, what that looks like, and then how does the agency evolve over time? What does that really look like? So anyway, I love hearing, not that your dad got sick, but that, you know, you were able to do an internal transition and do it well. And how long have you been in the agency, George? I'm not even 100% sure.
I don't know if I should even share that, Carey. You know, I think we might want to keep that a secret. I'd like to say it's only like just a few years, but actually it's probably, I started back in the 70s working in the office. I took the agency over in 93. And at that point, we bought several agencies. We acquired more. We purchased land. We bought a new building. We put a new building in. And, you know, we're one of the premier agencies in the county. Of course, it's a small rural space, but people know us. And we've enjoyed it. We've loved it. And my father, believe it or not, Carey, even though he sold the business to me, he never left. Okay. And up until COVID at 96, he was in the office every day.
Wow.
It's actually not uncommon for people to stay. The thing is, you know, here's the thing. Most agency owners, most agency people who have been part of a family-run business, it's part of who they are. And so the thought of leaving forever is daunting. In fact, I think it's one of the reasons why many agency owners don't want to talk about perpetuation and don't want to make that move, because it's their friends. It's the people they've interacted with their whole life. That business is more than just a business. It becomes part of truly who they are. So the trick is, when you're going to transition the ownership, being able to figure out how to transition responsibilities while you're still in the agency and all of that. So let's flip to one of the things you described, how you entered the agency, and that there were paper files, there were file cabinets, there were all these things, right? And here's the thing. There's actually agencies today that are still operating that
Absolutely.
way. They are few. Thankfully, they are few and far between. But when you came into the agency and your father moved into a different role and you started running the agency, I'm sure you wanted to be tech forward. I mean, just knowing your background. What did that look like? And what are some of the things that you did that many agencies today might be struggling with? Like, can you describe what that transition looked like?
Oh, I tell you, Carey, that's a great discussion, because here's the dilemma. You walk into the agency, 1993. Your father's in the hospital. He's got his partner there who started the agency with him. I've got Miss Pilson on the side, who's been there forever. She's got an electric typewriter. Mr. Rudd, who is the other partner, has a manual typewriter, Lindsay. That means there's no electricity, okay? So he's typing the bills out on carbon paper, Carey, carbon paper. Now, Lindsay, that's like a multiple paper piece where you hit it just kind of sends it through, in case you don't know.
I've seen a carbon paper before, George.
Okay, but you have to tear it off. And they had this filing system, Carey, which was absolutely beyond belief. They were in cookie tins. and he had them by the date. He had them by alphabetized, and another one he had. So he had them all set. We had to file the pieces in every piece, and you had to mail the other piece out. So the first thing I did, Carey, is I sat over in the corner. I bought a copy. I had a copy of DBase, which I had written an agency management system for my father, but they never really used it. So I set up and wrote a billing system in DBase in about 30 to 60 days and automated that whole process so we didn't have to use a typewriter to send the bills out. But they didn't care. They were like, hey, you want to do it? Have at it. So they set me in the corner, let me do my thing. Most of the technology, we put an agency management system in. We had to train them on how to use that. We had to hire some new staff, had to go through that process. No real issue up until there was one issue, Carey, which I'll share with you. And Lindsay, this is where you get the wisdom of the group that's been there for a while and kind of learned a lot. I wanted to get rid of taking payments in the office. I just thought it was taking too much time and effort, and I wanted to just stop it completely. So I did that. And then we started getting cancellations left and right. People were canceling like crazy. So we're sitting at the dinner table and I'm talking about it and I'm talking to my father about it. And he basically, I said, I don't know what's going on. He said, well, I do. And I said, well, tell me. He said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, you can learn it on your own. And I said, no, tell me. And then I finally got him to say it. So when he said it, I went back the next day. I said, we're taking payments. And we went back to taking payments because in our community, the dynamic was it was a small rural town where you've got people coming in from the manufacturing base of textiles and they get their paycheck, they take it to the bank, they cash it, and they go pay their bills. That's just the way they did it. They didn't have checking accounts. So when you took that out, that was the dynamic that for me, coming from a bigger city, having a college education, I just thought, well, shoot, everybody's got a checking account. But over the course of time, we did eliminate the payments in the office. But that was something you have to learn. There are great lessons you can learn from people who've been in this business for a while.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubting that. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to be on the podcast. There's so much knowledge and stuff out there that people who are my generation and just coming into the industry and are looking to take the next step in their career can learn from just having conversations and talking to mentors, which is why I appreciate you being such a great mentor, and our phone calls when we talk about random books we want to read and different ideas. So I am totally with you there. So one of the things that I've actually had a lot of discussions about recently, I'm in grad school and I took a leadership class last semester and it was super eye-opening. And one of the papers that I wrote for that class was all about taking over, like moving up in the organization where your people who were your peers, you now manage over. And I know you just said you wrote a AMS system and an online billing. What was that like? How did that relationship work when you're coming in as someone who used to work in the agency, but now you're a manager role? How did you get buy-in from the other people who worked in the agency with you?
Well, I think to that degree, I had already built up a good rapport with individuals in the agency, and they knew my heart was in it, right? And they guided me. I mean, Miss Pilson, I love Miss Pilson. She was awesome. She was so nice, and she worked with me and showed me different things. If you made a mistake, she didn't come down on it. She just said, now we need to do it this way next time, kind of thing. And I learned from that. So I took that information from them, and then as I wrote the system, I would ask questions and try to get their buy-in as we came about it and got it up to speed and get it in there. It took a little while, but they were receptive. But I had to listen to them as well, right? There's a give and take there. If I'd have just come in and said, no, this is the way we're going to do it and put it in front of them, they probably would have rejected it and pushed it off. So you've got to get adoption. And even when I'm working with agencies today, I talk to the managers about getting adoption from your staff. When you're looking for a management system and you're out there trying to find something today, don't just let the managers select it. Get some of the people that are going to use it day to day to come in and give their input and get their buy-in before you do it. Because otherwise, when you put it in, somebody's going to scream and shout and say, this is crazy. We should have never bought this. And they're going to create conflict in the agency. So I think getting the buy-in and having that rapport with the staff is important. And that's kind of what I did as I came in.
Yeah. What do you think some of the major challenges come with choosing new technologies and implementing new technologies in agencies?
Oh, Lindsay, what a great question. I like that. Carrie, that's a good question.
I know it
Yeah.
is.
So I think Lindsay, to that point, when I'm working with, and I'll just use selecting an agency management system as an example, and I'm going into agencies, I just like to sit down and talk to them about what are you doing today? What would you like to do in the future? Do you have any particular niches? Are there certain niches you want to get into? And getting all that information on paper and then talking about the agency as a whole. Talk about the staff. You know, look at the staff and figure out where your weaknesses and where your strengths and what areas do you need improvement in, right? And there's an educational aspect to that as well. And get all that information down. And then I create the document that we can give to the vendors as we're doing the vendor selection process that goes over what the agency culture is, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're doing today, what they'd like to do in the future. And here again, we're getting buy-in from the staff. And I think some of the issues that people have with new technology is they just say, well, we need a new management system because this particular feature is not there. It doesn't work. They call the vendors. The vendors come in and the vendors do the dog and pony show and show you all the feature set, right? But it's not solving the problems of the agency. Nobody's done an evaluation of what they're trying to accomplish, right? So you don't even know what the goal is. And you're buying a system and you put it in and you find out this is not what we want. And you spend a lot of time and effort and money on it. So what I try to do is get them to think that process through in the beginning and then create some documents out of that. So when we're going to the vendors and the vendors are coming in, we're looking at that process and we're seeing what we want to see, not what the vendor wants to show us. And then at the end of that, if the vendor wants to show any additional information, show that. And that's one piece. The second aspect of that is implementation, of course, and how the implementation goes and what you're going to do and set it up and make sure everything's set up correctly, because that'll have an impact as you go forward. And of course, adoption is probably the third piece. And I kind of bring that up in the front because adoption, you've got to have the people on board. And you need to have some champions in there, saying, hey, this is going to be great. We know that it's not going to be perfect. We're going to have problems, but we're going to get through those. And when it's all said and done, it's going to be a much better process for us. So technology, agents don't really understand a lot about technology. Most of them, there's some that are, but most of them don't. So it's really just doing that upfront piece and making sure you've got everything set and written down as to what you want and then presenting it to the vendors.
I've said this before on another episode, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's such an incredible point. Not using something because you don't understand how it works is just a mindset that I, as a young person, do not understand. There are so many pieces of technology in my life that I use daily, like my phone. I don't know how it tells when I tap on an app that it opens. But I know how to do it. I know how it works and I know how it helps me. And so I think that mindset of not using a piece of technology because you don't understand how it works is the wrong mindset to have,
Yeah, it's a little foreign to you because in the older segmentation of the population, right? People have been there for a while. They're scared to touch it because they're scared they're going to break it.
Right.
And are they going to do something wrong? It's going to create a problem. Right. And that goes back to, we were talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it's talking about aspects in there. And it's like some people are taught this way that you don't touch it, don't do that, you get in trouble. And the other side of the educational process is experiment, try new things, see what works. You're going to fail, and failure's okay.
Right.
We learn from our failures and we move on. So it is a complete different mindset, to your point. And it's getting that other part of the population to understand that, because the younger generation, they just jump right in head first and go.
Oh yeah.
Well, I also think there's some agents that jump right in. There's this shiny object syndrome that we have going on. So here's the deal. Like, we all go to conferences. And I've never seen a demo that I didn't love. Like,
I agree, Carey.
Like, you're going to show me the shiny new toy and it's going to solve all my problems. But what you said was, if you know what you're trying to solve and you do an evaluation of what your agency has, what it's trying to do, you will be focused and hopefully not do a fail, which is incredibly expensive, which then turns into an agency owner saying, I don't want to start anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Failure's fine as long as it's informed. But if it's a shiny object syndrome and you bring it in, you've not talked to your staff, it doesn't work, it doesn't solve their problems, it feels like more work, then it's really not, it's not going to help you. Right. So I love the approach that you laid out to say, okay, we want to take a very measured approach and really think about what we're trying to do. So help me. I know that you help lots of agencies with technology. I mean, that's really the thing that you've been doing. You have an agency,
yes.
but you also consult, and you're doing it with Catalyst. You've done it on your own. Like, I love what you're doing. And I love that you have a very approachable way about you, where you don't make people feel like, oh goodness, I'm super intimidated. You have expertise. I really like that approach. But I'm going to ask you a question that's probably hard for you to answer, but I'm going to see where we go here. What do you think today is one of the most impactful technologies that agencies do not have in their agencies today, but they should?
Oh, I think, Carey, it's a great question. I think there's several real answers to that, right? Now, I'll hit one right off the top. And I've said this for years. When I was working with Vertafore, one of the issues that we had was really pipeline management. It was trying to figure out the sales pipeline. What are the close ratios? How many leads are you getting in? We talk about this as the conferences all the time. And really, how are you performing? And are you selling a particular line of business that's really going off the charts, and that you can put more people on that and focus on that and grow your revenue stream? This goes back to data and knowledge and information. But we did a very poor job in the management systems of creating pipeline management, true sales pipeline management. People knew insurance. They wrote the programs for insurance purposes and for the CSR at the office to do what they wanted to do. But for the producers and the salespeople, really nothing out there. Until recently, you've got some products that came out like Insured Mind, Agency Zoom. Both have come out with pipeline management tools that integrate. Vertafore had the forethought to look out there and purchase Agency Zoom and bring it into their piece and integrate that. The integration's pretty good. And now you can look at that and see, what is it like for the leads that are coming in, or the leads that you're coming in from different sources? Is that source a good source of leads, or do we need to cut that one off and go with a different source because this other source is producing at 60 to 70% close rate? And shoot, I'd rather have more leads from there than have it from this other source. And there's just, the other technologies that are out there, I'll be careful with this, but I'll share this. I have this particular piece here, Data Strategy by Bernard Marr. Great. I love this guy. He's great. All about data, right? And Carey, I know you talked about this with Sid on the last podcast, but data is just so important in our industry. We have not done a really good job of giving managers and people that are looking after the business the ability to dive into that data and pull it in. And so there are products out there like Hadoop and Domo, which create data lakes where you can put this data in from different sources, and then you can map the data how you want it and create a dashboard and see, how many phone calls did I get in a day from your VoIP over IP system versus how many policies did I sell, how many leads came in, and you can track how many things were done. I mean, one of the issues I had with a management system recently, and I was talking to them about this very piece. You could run a report on past things that were completed, or excuse me, what was upcoming that hadn't been completed. But when you wanted to run a report on what they completed in the past, you couldn't run that report. So I couldn't go back in and say to this client, all right, how many change endorsements did you do? How many cancellations did you do? I mean, it was a very difficult process to pull that data. How many times did you answer the phone? In order to manage how people are doing their work, we need the data. And we need to be able to process that data. So I think data is another piece in there. And then, of course, I think the third piece to that is anything to do with the customer experience. The customer experience in our industry is just horrendous in most cases, because you come in for a quote, you have to give all this data and information, and then it takes a long time to get the quote back. And Lindsay, I'm sure you're right on this. When you want something, you go to your phone, you tap it in, and it's instantaneous. You get it and you move on. And when I talk to people about purchasing insurance, that's what they want to do. we've got to create better processes to get the data in. I know we're working on this, and there are a lot of systems out there that are implementing strategies, but then we've got to bring that data across multiple platforms to get it to where it needs to be. So there's a lot of things in there we've got to address in our industry, and we will get there. But I think those are some of the things, Carey, that I would point out.
Well, I would tell you, I can't ever talk about technology where data is not part of the part of the conversation. I mean, here's the thing, and I can't talk about insurance without marrying relationships in there as well. So while I want to have ease of doing business, I want to have instantaneous. I also want it to be when I'm ready. I can engage with someone. You know, I shop after hours or at 4 a.m. when I'm up early and I know exactly what I want to do. Like, that's just the reality of who I
Absolutely.
am. So I can't do it between 8 and 5. I'm working at 8 and 5. I'm actually working far more hours than 8 to 5. So my answer is, but I also want the advice I need. You know, my situation, I have acquired some things in my life, and my insurance isn't easy. And I greatly value the advice that comes with the agents that I've engaged with. And I would agree, you know, Lindsay, you can talk about this from your perspective. You guys just bought a house, you bought a condo, and, you know, she's doing some things on her own. Like, it's not a thing you just want to go online and purchase as a quick and easy transaction. You want the advice because it's a big decision. And if something goes wrong, you want to make sure that you're handled. So none of us on this podcast today think that technology is going to replace the advice that's going to happen, or any magic data is going to turn us into something that we don't need agents. I will tell you, though, data is a pretty crazy buzzword. And, you know, connecting when someone says we need the data in order to run our business better, a lot of people don't know what that means. They just don't. And it's really hard to connect. All right, what piece of information do I need to run my agency better that's going to make me more efficient and ultimately increase the value of my agency? Can you give me one specific example of that, George, from your perspective? And I think the more we can connect the dots here, the better we are serving agents.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things here. In a couple of instances where I've worked with clients, one a very large client, Carey, it's really looking at across the board, and we're talking hundreds of agencies, right? And they're using systems which bring this into a data lake, and they're looking at touch points. So they're looking at where they're selling policies and what types of policies they're selling. And then they're trying to figure out who's selling those policies. So when they figured out that this particular individual is really selling a lot of, say, trucking insurance, then they go back to that person and they say, hey, we noticed this. You're really killing it in this particular area. Would you be willing to do a seminar for our internal team with our producers talking about how you do this? And then what happened was they took that information back. They did the seminar and trained the other producers on how to do it. And now they're selling trucking insurance in their area, and now the trucking piece is growing in revenue, right? So from that perspective, that's a larger perspective. Now you take this down to a smaller perspective, and you're looking at smaller agencies. Some of the things that we look at, and you may think this is really minute, but it's how many policies do you have with a client, and how do you cross-sell that client, and putting processes in place that use digital marketing to reach out to the client to say, hey, we have your auto, we don't have your home. And then they call in, you don't even call out, right? And you can create call list as well to call out and research with them and say, we'd love to get this information. And now in the auto piece, which is amazing, for auto, if you want to quote, all you really need is somebody's name, and then you need their address. You plug that in, it gives you all the data popping into the rater, and you can rate it. So when you call them on the phone, you've got pretty much an established real quote for them without them having to give you any real data until you run maybe the MVR report or the Clue report. So from the small perspective, it's, I would say, cross-selling in the agencies and looking at that data and helping them to grow that business, because the organic growth in the agency we overlook. A lot of the agencies look at how many net new policies do we sell, but they don't look at what they've got and what the potential is. One of the things that we like to do is go into the agencies and run reports and say, okay, do you know you've got 2,500 policies for auto that don't have a home? And if X percentage of these have a home and you could sell X percentage of that, you could increase your revenue by Y. Okay. And
Yeah.
then you use it. It's really, it's not rocket science. It's basic stuff. You just have to think about it and execute it.
So I think the key is being able to mine your own data and be predictive about where you will be most successful in getting your clients to be rounded, or what might they need next. I mean, looking at your data and finding how many customers that you have today have 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. Just think about this and educating them. I was terrified when my kids started to drive.
She
Are you
was.
kidding
That's
me?
true.
But
Was she, Lindsay?
Oh,
Was she
yes.
terrified?
Oh, yes. This is a random tangent, but she took me to get my temps. In Ohio, it's 15 and a half. You can go get your temps. And I decided, okay, I want to drive home. We lasted like a stoplight, and she was like, get out. You're not driving. We work much better now today together, but back then my dad taught me how to drive.
Yeah. I tell you, Lindsay, that's great because with my daughters, I took them out to a high school parking lot and got the old minivan and put them in the minivan and started driving around. And my eldest daughter, as soon as we got there, there was a stop sign in the parking lot. She went right through it, and she went, "Oops."
Oops.
well, I don't know why I brought up driving, because I knew that this was not going to be a good thing. There are benefits to doing a podcast with your daughter, and then there are not some benefits. I'm just kidding.
I love it.
Anyway,
I love it,
my point is you can be very predictive, and you can also empower your team to have their efforts be fruitful.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, if you're just shooting in the dark, imagine a new person coming into an agency, one that thinks and has a data strategy versus one that doesn't. I'm going to be so much more productive and so much more successful if they're investing in the things that allow me to have insights that help me understand this business so much quicker. And so again, it's not a replacement. Data doesn't replace what we do. It really enhances what the business is doing and helps us run the business differently. And I think the deal is people are doing it. And you're competing with those agencies that are doing this and doing this well, right?
So true. And if you're not, if you've got the auto and you don't have the home, and the other agency has the home and they've got a strategy, they're calling for the auto. And then you're going to lose the auto, and you're going to like, well, what happened? Well, this guy called me. I could get a multi discount with the policies, and I can get this other discount. Oh, we could do the same thing. Well, you never called me. So that's the issue. So it's looking at the data. Now, wouldn't it be nice, Carey, if the management system tagged in with the social media platforms of the client? So when the client's out there putting data in the social media platform and they say something, oh, we just got this new whatever boat, got this new Sea Ray, and we're riding around in it, and it notifies the system back to make a phone call to say, hey, you need to check with this client. Looks like they bought a boat. And then they call in about the boat insurance and say, hey, did you pick up any boat insurance? We need to have that thing insured.
So yes, it would be fabulous. And I believe Arias Analytics is able to do that kind of data connection. So the whole point is that's happening in our industry.
Exactly.
I don't want to speak out of turn, and I'm not an expert on any technology that's out there, but what you just described is something that Arias Analytics and Donna is able to do. So it can be very predictive and actually help you mine your own book of business that you may not have coverage that your customers have in place, and they're able to use external data to help augment what you're doing and make sure that you can be proactive to help agencies. So yes, it would be amazing. Yeah. It is happening is the answer.
And to that point, Carey, with Donna, Donna is also managing those phone calls coming in and determining if the phone call is a good call or a bad call. And if it's a bad call, then it's flagging that up for management to go listen to and maybe call the client back and say, in a sentiment score, and call back and say, hey, we were, understand you're not happy with this. Can I take a few minutes and explain this to you and try to resolve that? So those are things, because the people's staff may not tell you about that bad call because it may have been something they did. They didn't want you to know. They're trying to keep that low key. But Donna pulls that out and brings it forward. And yes, I talked to those guys at a recent conference, and they're doing amazing things with artificial intelligence, which, Lindsay, brings me back to another topic. And
Mm-hmm.
that is Chat GPT, Lindsay.
Oh
And
yeah.
Lindsay, I was really amazed. And I was looking, and all of a sudden, I see appear this nice little blog on the website talking about Chat GPT. And I looked down and it said Lindsay Wallace. And I went, that rascal beat me to the punch.
Oh, you're funny.
But I was proud, Lindsay. I was proud to see that. So
Thank
tell me,
you.
tell me, just let's just. I want to throw this back. So ChatGPT, how did you hear about it, and what do you think about it? And then I'll give you my thoughts on it.
Okay, so I heard about it. Avi Knight sent me an email and said, OMG. No, he didn't say OMG. He doesn't say OMG. But he said, sorry, Avi, you don't say OMG. But he sent a group of the staff an email and said, check out this new technology, like right when it launched. And he said, I just had it write me a child story about insurance and it is awesome. And so I'm like, child story about insurance? What? And so I opened it up. I was able to get an account fairly quickly before it kind of took off.
Oh
And
yeah, it did take off.
it did take off. I love it. I mean, I use it, I would say daily, if not like, well, yeah, I do use it daily. Um, and I honestly use it for creating ideas. I don't necessarily
Hmm.
use it for like, write me a caption for this image. I don't do that, but I use it for, hey, here are 5 topics. Write me 5 ideas for a social media caption for these. Or I have this event coming up. Here's some information about it. Write me a couple ideas for a newsletter post about this. And it's so helpful in my
Oh,
daily role. I mean, so
it's
helpful.
fascinating, and I think to that degree, and I'll have to check the stats on this, but I read an article the other day that Microsoft is looking to put $10 billion into OpenAI, which is the basis of ChatGPT. And then, when I used it the first time, I just typed in a couple things, and I mean, I just imagine this, Carrie, back in the day when we were in college, and you had to write an essay or you had to write a paper, and it was the night before, and you hadn't even started. It would have been really nice to have had Chat GPT and just type the title in there and have it just print out some information, and then you
Amen.
could go back
Yeah.
in and do some more research and add to it and do whatever you needed to do. But and that's going to be another challenge going forward, not in the insurance world, but in the educational world. But I think in the insurance world, think about it from the perspective of clients, and tying this into the system. So if they've got a question, they go to the website and they type in a question, and it just automatically responds with an answer. You know, what is comprehensive insurance, or other than collision insurance? Are these the same things, and what does it mean? And what is a deductible? What is collision? What does it cover? And that automatically is printing this stuff out and sending it back, and it's incredibly fast. It amazed me the
Hmm.
first time I used this technology that it wasn't like you were waiting for a couple of minutes for it to put it together. I mean, it was seconds, and it just
Yeah.
appeared. So I think to that degree, I use it for things like, social media, blog posts, things of that nature, to get some ideas and kind of get that creative thought going. And then after you see that, you can add to it and put your thoughts in and change some things up and work on it. But what a phenomenal technology. And think about the whole industry of search. Now, with Google today, you go into Google and you put the information in, and it gives you a list of places you can go to get more data. But now with ChatGPT, it goes right to the source. It takes all those data
It
sources, you
does.
type it in, and it's right in front of you. And you're just like, this is amazing. And that's going to change the whole environment when you start thinking about search and what responses come back. Now, the other piece to that we get into, is the data correct? Is the data source correct? Are you getting the right information? So there's a lot to that. And I think Sam Altman even said in one of his tweets, this is not perfect. This is our first go at this, but still, they have a tremendous amount of data built in, and 4.0 is on the horizon. And I just can't wait to see where we're going to go. But
Right.
it is absolutely phenomenal.
Right. Well, yeah, and I've gotten a couple comments on my post. I think Wortham Boyle actually had a great point. He said, I've asked it, simpler questions and it gets it right very quickly, but I've asked it more complex insurance questions and it will give me the wrong answer. But when I prompt it further, it corrects itself. And so I think the more
Mm.
people are using it and the more people who are entering information and challenging the AI, it's going to get better and it's only going to go up from here.
Oh, I totally
Well,
agree.
I think it's a good lesson for all of us, though. Let's just think about this for a second, because we're talking about agents using technology inside their agency. And here's what I will tell you, there's danger in using some data. Like,
Hmm.
let's just be honest about this. So, let's say you run a report inside your agency and you just look at the numbers and you immediately jump to the conclusion of this employee isn't working appropriately, or this one customer service person isn't doing something because the numbers tell you that when you compare it. Let's just say that. That is not how data works. Data works when you can look at the numbers and then use your own understanding and your own
Hmm.
expertise to write the story that that data is telling you. You have to go deeper than just the numbers, just like you have to go deeper than Chat
Right.
GPT in order for it to be super effective for you. So, I would caution anyone as you're moving into becoming more data driven, or you're moving into using some of these technologies, don't underestimate your own expertise and your own gut. It is a combination of both that gets you where you're going. I did a presentation actually with Trent Richmond of agency KPI, and we had a whole scenario about this that was super important. Honestly, the data that was in front of us actually said he was overstaffed and he needed to get rid of someone in his claims, and it actually wasn't the case. There was a completely different
Hmm.
situation inside his agency, but on the surface, that's what the data was telling. So I would just say go deeper than the numbers, go deeper than
Agreed.
Chat GPT, and really make sure that it's enhancing what you're doing, not again just the absolute, because that's not how
Right.
this
Yeah,
works.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, Carrie. And I think, we all have to look at that, especially when we're talking about staff and performance is, you've got numbers, you've got some data, but you do need to dive deeper to figure out what the real facts are and then make the decisions.
George,
Agreed.
what kind of advice would you give someone who is my age who's looking to grow as a leader in an agency and is interested in implementing these different technologies that we've talked about?
I would say, there are a lot of things there, Lindsay. I think we've got really good people in our industry. And that's one of the things I love about this too, Carrie, is that the people in the industry are so willing to just help other people. I mean, right now where I am in my career, I, I love working with younger people and trying to train them and educate them and give them the knowledge they need to continue on and succeed. I'm not going to say I have every answer because I don't. I don't know everything, but I can give you some of my experiences. You can take that along with other people's experiences, and you can learn from that from a mentor perspective. And then I think, just learning and educating yourself and reading and trying new technologies and learning, because a lot of the agencies today, they don't, the agency owners don't do that. They're managing their books of business. They've got other issues going on. They don't have time to look at this other technology area. So as you're coming into it, and you can evaluate it and determine, would this be a good fit for the agency, and bring it to management and say, here's why I think this would be a good fit, and I'd like to make this recommendation, and just kind of see what they say. And I think the other piece to this as well, and I've told my daughters this, is, you've got to learn how to sell yourself and to sell in general. Okay, we're all salespeople to some degree, and you need to be confident. You need to be sure. You need to do your work to figure out what you're going to say is correct. And then you need to know how to sell that to somebody and understand and listen to them and have empathy for them and figure out where they are in their process, and say, here's what I think I can help you with. Now, one of the things I learned in my career, uh, and I had one of my managers come to me one day and he said, George, I don't understand. He said, everybody else is off their numbers. You're at the top of your game. What are you doing differently? And this was in the agency management system space. And I said, well, here's the way it works. I said, I go in, I talk to the agent, and I ask them some questions. I let them tell me everything that's going on, where their problems are, and I listen, and I ask some more questions, and then they tell me some more problems, and I take notes, and then I say, well, thank you for your time, and I leave, and I go back and see if our solution will fit what they need, and I put together a proposal. I go back and I give them the presentation. I show them how it's going to solve their problems, and then they buy. Okay, so I think that's another piece to it as you're coming up in the industry. Uh, learn as much as you can. You know, and really listen to the other people that are out there that have been there for a while and listen to what they have to say. Now, sometimes they're going to be dead on the money and they're going to be right. Sometimes they're not, and that's okay. And then that's where your sales process comes in, to sell them your thoughts and ideas, not putting them down in any way, but saying, here's another option. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I love that advice. I think that is just solid advice to your point about learning how to sell in general, sell yourself, and also sell other things. I think that is such a valuable piece of advice for anyone who's in the early stage of their career to learn.
Yeah, and I believe you had a post, Lindsay, about ICE. Was that correct?
I did.
Tell me about the ICE post.
Okay, so we have this saying at IANC that's just buy the ice. So there was a story once at a staff meeting told that we were having an event and the freezer was out of ice, and many people had seen it and no one did anything about it. And then one person saw that we were out of ice, went to the grocery store, gas station, wherever you buy ice at, and bought a bag of ice for the office. And so at our next staff meeting, we were reflecting on that, and it's become just kind of a motto in my brain. Sometimes if I'm thinking of an idea and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this is right. I don't know if I should spend the time on it. Just buy the ice, just do it. And I think that's what I said in my post, is it embodies the Nike's just do it, but in a professional setting, right? Just get it done. Just, if it's not your job, doesn't really matter.
And I love that. I love that post. And it brought me back to a couple of times in my career, one of which at a convention, we're sitting there and somebody forgot to order the carpet for the stage. Not a huge issue, but they were all upset about it. And it was in an area that I knew. And so I picked up the phone, I called Lowe's, and I said, if I need a carpet piece by X, could you cut that for me? And how much would it be? And they told me. So went out, I got one of the vans that they had, drove down to Lowe's, rolled it up, put it in the van, drove it back, and we laid it down. They were like, where'd that come from? They said, oh, George and so-and-so went and got it at Lowe's. Yeah. And they're like, you're kidding me. I mean, it's to your point, right? So sometimes we just have to do the right thing. And I wanted to commend you on that. I saw that. I thought it was a great post.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming on, George. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot. I have a list of notes here of things to look into, books to read, different things, but I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on.
Yeah, and thank you for the...
So, George, if people want to reach you, if people want to reach out and they want to know how to get a hold of you, tell our listeners where they can find you.
Absolutely. George Robertson 44, that's LinkedIn. And then GeorgeRobertsonConsulting.com is the website. So those are two great ways to get up with me and to learn more about what I've done in the past and get some more information on me. And thank ladies, I love this. The team right here.
The dream team.
All right. Well, yeah, we definitely got Wallace Squared going. So thank you so much for being our guest, and we look forward to talking to you real soon.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.